we're going to talk about a few ways of bending pitch on guitar. So, obviously, first, you could uh, bend your strings up or down and add a lot of tension into them, and that'll take your pitch higher. But if you don't want to add tension to your strings, say you want to relax your strings a little bit and bend pitch down, there are some ways to do that, and we're going to talk about it. Okay. So first, here's how you could bend pitch down. If you know that here is like a whole step or a half step up from where the string sits naturally, hear that little wow, wow, wow. Okay, so that works for like individual strings, but uh, maybe your fingers they can't do that. Maybe your finger strength isn't there yet. You just started playing guitar. You can't go on the first fret on an acoustic and bend that string. That's okay. These strings are pretty tough, and not everybody can do that. But if you are having trouble bending strings with your fingers, there are some things to be done about that. So for example, it's easier to bend strings here than it is here. It is also easier to bend your strings if you decrease the tension on them. So if you tune your whole guitar, take every string down a half a step or take every string down a whole step, being in D standard or C standard tuning or C sharp standard tuning, or being lower than E standard is going to make things easier in the bending department. So if your finger strength is having issues bending your strings, just bring yourself down to a lower tuning. And if you're playing with your friend who's still in E standard, say you tuned yourself down 2 half steps, just put a capo right there. Capos are like $6. If you don't have a capo, what I've done before is put a bar like a pencil or like a glass bar that they have sometimes and just wrapped that on there to make that the new starting point of the neck. So you could have uh, the same pitch of strings. You could still sound like you're in E standard tuning, but actually be achieving that with a much lower tension, with a much shorter neck by cutting off a few frets with a capo and bringing your whole tuning down. You could do that. So that would make it way easier to bend pitch. The only trouble with bending your strings that way is that if you have a capo on and you try to bend pitch with your fingers, watch what happens. You can sometimes leave the string in a bent position, right? Because the capo will hold it there. So that time it didn't really do it, but if I really, nope, it's behaving well today. But it's sometimes happens that when you bend a string, the capo will just keep it there in that bent state, and that's not really what you want to happen. So that's something to be careful of, but an option is to make yourself lower. You'll have less tension. And if you need to be higher, you can get higher with a capo. So that's an option. But what if you bent your pitch down? What if you knew that you were just going to play an E open string? You knew that that was what was going to ring out, and you wanted that to bend down slightly at a specific time. You could do that with your tuning knobs. So that's another way to bend down. And then if you can kind of remember where your hand was, if I can see my hand is forward, so I can bend it like 90 degrees, and that'll get me about half a step of bend at pitch. So those are a couple ways. But there are more ways of bending pitch. Like if you have a bridge that's strong enough, like if you have an electric guitar, those solid bodies, they can get those big old metal like Rose Floyd bridges, and those are strong enough to support what's called a whammy bar. You've probably seen these and thought, I want one of those. What's that called? They're great. They take the whole, they bend the whole bridge toward, they tilt the whole bridge toward the neck, and that tilt makes the strings not have to be stretched over such a long distance, and that decreases their tension a little bit, and that can bend your pitch. So that's another option that the guitarists have. But if your guitar isn't capable of withstanding that mechanical stress, don't do that. You'll break your guitar if you put a whammy bar on certain guitars. It won't work. So that doesn't work for everybody. So what could we do that is kind of universal, that wouldn't put as much stress on the instrument? Um, well, there's a kind of a stressful way where guitarists, acoustic guitars, try to do kind of what the whammy bar is doing, where they'll actually bend their neck. So I don't know if you heard there was a slight bend there, but it looks like I'm bending it more than I am because it's, but you're giving it a slight bend, and you're helping the strings to relax a little bit by using the neck. And that could kind of work no matter what guitar you're playing, but that could damage your guitar. Like if you're playing a guitar that's 100 years old, do not go up to it and just snap the neck. So, what if you don't want to snap your guitar's neck? What if you're trying to do some intricate fingering here and you don't want to be like bending on that during that? So, what's another option? Another option that's kind of like universal, could work on any guitar, is this. Just read what the strings are doing. Either have metal strings or put a piece of metal on your strings and read them with magnetic pickups. Take that signal, and instead of running it directly to your amplifier, run it into a pedal first. And in this case, this isn't a pitch bending pedal or a whammy pedal, but we'll use our imaginations and say that these whammy pedals, these pitch bending pedals, they do exist, and they're a little expensive, but my friend has one that we're gonna kind of try this with. But what if instead of just putting a pitch bending pedal on the ground, so you kind of have like a third hand, like you can operate it with your foot, what if you wanted it to be up here where a whammy bar is? You could probably do that. We were gonna try to put a whammy pedal right here on the guitar, so that it's kind of more accessible. So that would be a way too, is not just to electrophonically bend your pitch down so that you don't have to stress your instrument out, but put it on there so that it's just like where the whammy bar used to be, or could be on some. So yeah, those are some ways of bending pitch down, and hopefully you learned a new one. Hopefully you learned some new way of bending pitch on your guitar, and just keep playing. Just keep trying to learn stuff. And if your fingers hurt, that means you're winning. So maybe just lower your tension if you have to, but just suck it up and try to keep getting better. And just let me know if you find out any cool ways of bending pitch. Thank you for listening to my TED Talk about pitch bending, and yeah, have a nice day.